Right, that's got all my stuff done. So so basically it's sort of a chat. It's a discussion, and it's like imagine the Greek village, and this lunatic walks around wearing white shirts and bothers people. That's me. I'm your Socrates tonight. I go around and bother you with all sorts of silly things, etc. That's what we're going to do. Anyway, tonight we're going to talk about, as you know, us and them, who we are, and why. When I started the last meeting, I said that philosophy can be summed up by what is it all about, and that was not a glib remark. But so let me expand on that. Philosophy is I would say, an authentic and serious and systematic reflection on the individual and collective human condition. And the human condition is the important part, because that's what we're talking about. And everything that I've been writing about and talking about is to do with us as humans, and that's the most important part of this. And very, very, very exciting it is that with all these things that are happening at the moment, the world seems to be in turmoil, etc., etc. It is philosophy that can keep up with it, and it's not necessarily new philosophy, but the things we talk about, we can deal with all the crazy things that are going on and try to make sense of them. So what I do want to say is that oh yes, I didn't mention that you can interrupt me whenever you want. I will tell you to I will either answer it, or I'll say, hang on, I'll get to it, or something in that way. So it's perfectly all right to interrupt me if you don't agree, but even better if you do agree. Okay, so I want to start off by saying that that everything we do or think about is directed towards another person, the other, even if it's an imaginary other. We have to let out what we want to say. Even if we let it out to ourselves, it stays there, but I'm gonna talk about it. This is a huge subject. It's going to be a rough ride, and there's so much to say, and I'm only going to say a bit of it. I'll try and not make it that heavy and not mention that many philosophers as I go along, so I've got to mention myself first of all. So it doesn't mean that we who are discussing things, or philosophers, will solve it all. In fact, anybody who says they will solve everything...
You're frozen.
I beg your pardon? Who? I'm not frozen. Look. Who said I'm frozen? Okay, I'm imagining it. Anyway, be that as it may, it doesn't mean that we're going to solve everything, but and for us to claim such a thing is ridiculous. It's hubris, and nobody should say they're going to solve everything, including scientists. Scientists who say they're going to solve things, that is not right, in my very humble opinion. What we do is we wait for better answers to come along, hoping we're going to move forward. We never solve anything entirely, ever. If we did, I'd have to stop these meetings, because we'd have solved it, right? Even I haven't solved things, although I've solved some things. So here's a quote from Richard Feynman. I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. And remember that he was very skeptical about philosophy, didn't go for it, etc. But that was a very, very good remark, because if we've got questions, that's all we can hope to do, and it's the questions that move us forward, not the answers. Okay, so it's a bit, in these talks, basically I talk about my philosophy in regard to to others. And it's very awkward that that we have this once a month, because I pull out a subject and we talk about it. Last month we talked about knowledge. It was a great huge thing. We take it out as if that's it, but it's not. It's part of a system that I have, and I just want to just show you for a second that share 1 second. This is basically the principle that I work on. So we've got, and you'll see these coming through all the way through. There's dissonance, there's fragmentation, and there's approximation. And those are my principles, and you can see how it works as we go along. So that's the end of showing off that I can share things. Okay, so there are 4 things that we're going to sort of deal with today, or not, but hopefully. One is who are them? I say us and them. I mean, who are them, they, right? And then of course I have to ask, who are us? And that's connected. And the third one is, what makes the difference? I mean, can those two be together? Is there us and them together? And the fourth thing, of course, is why is it important? Which everybody always asks me at some point, what are you talking about and who cares? But I think we do care, because when we talk about them, we will always have to talk about us. But I want to now ask, is it us and them, or is it us versus them? And that's very, very important. In order to do that, we have to look at us in relation to the other. And a lot of philosophers have talked about this, from basically from Hegel onwards, who actually mentioned the other. But they looked at it in a very deep metaphysical way, which I won't go into that much tonight. But if you look at somebody called Levinas, who said that that we have to look at us in relation to the other. Okay, he says the importance of the other is not because it leads us somewhere else, but because it is the core of what it means to be human. In order to us to be human, we have to deal with the other. And this is ethics. I haven't until today talked about ethics, and I haven't written much about it, but this is a strand from what I have been writing, and the other is absolutely essential. So what is us? Okay, what is this? We can cut it down into units, into sets, into what I call bubbles. You can do anything you want with sets. We here are a set. Now the people that are in this meeting are a set. Okay, you've got Western versus and the Eastern, Northern, Southern hemispheres. You've got nations in the US. You've got states, and you've got counties, and we all belong to something, and they're all sets. And we've got the rich and the poor, and we've got the black and the white, and we've got the intelligent and not intelligent, and the clever ones and the not clever ones. And we're always doing this, whether we know it or not. And as we get closer and closer to us, we get to acquaintances of family, and we get to friends, we get to best friends, we get to the nuclear family, and obviously it's us and the government and the income tax authorities, and we're all in our sets, and we have to worry about the end bit, which is us. And so are we part of the set, or are we our own set? So eventually we do get to the smallest unit, which is us, ourselves as individuals. So then then of course we ask what the self is, and you'll be pleased to know I won't be dealing with that tonight, because that's a huge topic. That's for another 10 hours work on self. But it's not so much the self tonight. I want to talk about the self in relation to everyone else. What happens here, basically, if you notice that when you zoom in on these sets, you get to an approximation, and the closer you zoom in, the fewer things there are in that set. That applies to everything. It applies to maths. It applies to humans. Today we're talking about people. So the smaller you get, the more you zoom in, and the fewer you find in there, the more they share. But of course, eventually you get to us, and you realize that we are a big mess too, because inside us there's a whole lot of stuff that we share with us and share with other people, and we're back out again looking for what is common. Okay, so I think it is clear that there is no us without them. All right. Now, my question would be: can we have opinions if we weren't exposed to others' opinions? Could there possibly be a thing like an opinion if you've never heard an opinion? That was a question. Anybody want to say anything? If not, I carry on. So, for reason.
I want to say something.
Yes, Frank.
I want to refer to the remark you made about focusing in to something smaller and smaller, zooming in on something, right? It reminds me of a Google map, a good example of a Google map. When you zoom in on a Google map, you leave out the macro path and you go into the tiny streets, into the houses, into the gardens, and you focus on something which is very, very specific, and therefore you leave out other things. That's one thing. Another thing is when you talk about the person speaking to himself or being with himself, there's always the other. Even though the person by himself, he's still with the other, right? And if you're still with the other, so you're saying we're all schizophrenic, really.
Yeah, perhaps we are.
Are we all schizophrenic?
Maybe, I don't know. It's not.
Is it clear coming through?
Pardon? Your sound is very weird, Frank. You're splitting up into your different personalities.
Which is the consciousness, the superconscious, the hyperconscious, and all the rest of it. In
Yes.
other words, Freud looked at it differently.
Yes, but
that's what I have to say for that. I think.
You're quite first of all, the map. You're absolutely right. If you want to find your way, is somewhere. There's a certain part of the map that you need. If you focus in too much, you won't see anything apart from one tiny bit that you don't even need. In fact, all good maps leave out all the rubbish. They won't put in the rubbish bins, for example, that are in the street, because you don't need them. You need enough. You need enough approximately to get to where you want to. Approximately is the key word. It is enough for what you need. It's a matter of it's a matter of approximation. It's where you are. Regarding the other thing, yeah, I hope you're not denying that you sometimes speak to yourself. Even, I'm not saying loudly, then you could be locked up. But basically, when we sit alone, we discuss things with ourselves. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. Also in a dream, by the way, you speak to yourself.
Well, there you are then. So
there you are.
So there you have it. Morris.
Can I make a comment?
I wanted to ask whether we can look at it also from a developmental point of view. And that is to say, as a human being develops from the tiniest baby, there has to be a point at which that human being differentiates himself from his mother and all the rest. That is to say that there is a point in development at which, if we do not understand that there is the self and everybody else, and we get stuck there, we don't work properly as humans.
Yes, Lacan actually said, mentioned that babies don't differentiate between things that are living and things that are not. They will talk to their dolls and their toys, and it takes a while for them to realize that those things won't talk back. This is something wrong with either
I don't remember whose work it was, but there is work on the idea that in the first few months of life, a baby sees himself and his mother as one. And that is the initial differentiation. And we're now talking about just a development further from that initial differentiation.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, in relation to what you said, Maurice, Lacan, that Ron, you've just mentioned, he actually talked, he's also a French philosopher, psychologist. French, they were very busy with self and the other. And one of his claims was that people or humans become individuals when they can recognize themselves in the mirror. When a child recognizes himself in the mirror, he sees the other and is therefore becomes an individual. And that is the development, a child's development. You can see with cats, sometimes it's very funny when they look at themselves in the mirror and they become all aggressive because they think it's another cat. They cannot recognize themselves as the other. I mean, they can't recognize the other as themselves. It depends on the relation. But that is the development of a baby that can see his separation from, or her separation from the mother, and he sees himself as the other, or he sees the mother as separate to herself. So that's that's the difference between being an individual and being an object, or being a subject. The difference between being a subject and being an object.
I just sorry, Terry. Yes, sorry.
I was commenting, just to follow up on what you just said, that is also very much a topic in artificial intelligence, is the concept of self, and the lack of it in most versions of artificial intelligence have no concept of self whatsoever. But the idea of creating a general artificial intelligence, a lot of discussion, a lot of thinking, a lot of worrying about what does that mean to have a self-concept, and how does it affect the stability, the ability of an artificial intelligence to work. The biggest danger is, we seem to have solved this biologically, but in computer systems, it's a very good way for it to self-destruct. It can literally go insane, it can change itself, it can unwind all of the protections that are intended to be in that system. So we as humans do that, but it's not a trivial thing to have a concept of self. And people who have tried to program it know that it's actually quite dangerous. You cannot easily go down that path. I had a comment on a different topic, if I could, which was that narrowing down into a subset, I think is a fascinating hidden dimension of that. I don't know how it's addressed or if it's addressed in philosophy, is an inverse relationship of trust. The smaller you focus in, the tinier you get into this area, the more you are implicitly trusting the environment around you and just assuming it's all going to be stable enough and trustworthy. Point. Everything is stable and trustworthy. And of course, that often is not the case, but there's an interesting relationship that goes back and forth between those two.
Interesting.
So, Dan Reiner, was he trying to talk?
Yeah, Ellie.
Yeah, no, just on the subject of development and what Debbie's introduced, it's just got me thinking in relation to language that toddlers get introduced to, and I have the idea that it is sometimes through language that we learn to differentiate between you and I, and by positioning and by use of language and narrative, people learn, or children learn through a sense that they are separate to the other. And part of that process happens that the self emerges in the context of the story they start to acquire from the other through what is being said, the exchange. But it's about the person position, I, you, me, they, we, and how we position and are positioned in relation to those distinctions.
Did you want to say, did anybody, no, I thought, Benno, did you want to say something? I heard.
Yeah. Oh.
I mean, I don't have anything in particular to add, except to say that, you know, in some philosophical traditions, getting rid of the self is actually the whole point. You start with individuals, and talking about Buddhism in particular, and the idea is to understand that the self is an illusion. And, you know, so that, I mean, it's neither here nor there, but to suggest that this isn't the only way to address these topics. And then I'll just also add that a lot of the things that you said in the beginning of the discussion about our positionality, the individual with society, with different hierarchies of groups, is fundamental to Confucianism and to Neo-Confucianism. There's one of the core documents in Confucianism is called the Dashui, or the Great Learning. And it's a very short document, about 3 pages, translated everywhere. That just it's a hierarchy from cosmos to the world, to the state, to the community, to the family, to the individual, to the heart mind, and then it goes back the other direction. And that's, you know, one of the 5 core documents in Confucianism. And then Neo-Confucianism really builds on these much more metaphysical understandings of the self. So that's all out there. I'm not an expert on this stuff, but that you know, there are other philosophical traditions that deal with these issues.
Yes, I was gonna come to that a little bit later.
Oh, sorry.
No, not exactly that. What I meant to say was about Buddhism, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Schopenhauer is an example of a Western philosopher who said that that in order to be equal, to be the same, you would need to take away everything that separates them, that makes them different. So what you get to is one. And he was a Western philosopher, and he got to the one, which is Buddhism and Hinduism, etc. And that is that anybody who knows me knows I don't go for that. But I mean, this is it's an interesting thing because I think that the differentiation between people is essential, and the one is problematic because it becomes it's a mysticism, and it's where the dissidence, where God comes in, that we supposedly are made in God's image, the West, but God is there and we are here, and the fact that we are not one with God but separate from Him, but the Orthodox, I know the Orthodox Christianity is different. The Orthodox says that the aim is to become one with God, which is completely different from the Jewish religion, the other Christian religions, Muslim, etc. It is different. And Spinoza was thrown out of the religion for that very, very reason. He said that we need to be one with God, and that goes completely against the Jewish religion that he was part of. He was never forgiven for that, and that's a few hundred years. That was a huge sin, this business of being one with God. So that took me along there. Ellie, did you want to say something? Did I see a hand somewhere? No. Okay. So, Frank, yes.
Yeah. First of all, regarding language, I think the philosopher Martin Buber also spoke about the philosophy of to, you, and thou in order to to separate the two individuals within you and
Yes.
to relate to the other. Is that correct?
Yes, I, you, I, thou. Yes.
Yeah.
That was a very,
Yeah.
very deep
his whole
stuff.
philosophy was bound on that. Yeah.
Yes.
And the other thing was that when you talk about the Christian ideal is really in the mystic ideal is really to eliminate the other one completely, is to form one person with God, completely go for the identification with God. In other words, bring God within yourself, that you are not split up between yourself and somebody else, but you are entirely whole, you're one person, and you're married to God in that sense, in that spiritual sense. That's mysticism.
Okay.
Oh.
If I can make a comment on
that you completely immerse yourself within the idea of God.
That's Frank is frozen. You sinned there, Frank, by saying the wrong thing. You were frozen.
Oh, I was frozen.
You were frozen. You were speaking heretical stuff.
So I was punished. I was punished.
You were punished on the spot.
Coup de foudre.
Yeah.
Another thing, I don't quite agree with you when you talk about Spinoza, by the way. I mean, Spinoza really said that God is split up. He's everywhere in nature. You can find him in every part of nature, wherever you go. He's not one. He is everywhere in different parts.
Including us.
Yes, including us.
That was the sin.
Of course. Because it was going back to paganism, to see God in inanimate things or in natural things everywhere apart from within yourself.
Well, there's a very strong movement called panpsychism now. That's quite a big thing. That they say that everything has consciousness. Everything, all the stones and all that stuff. So, and that's quite a big movement now.
Well, that's all New Age, isn't it?
Yes, that's one way of putting it. But anyway, it's a very big movement, because you've got to look after nature, and it's got consciousness the way we have, and don't hit the stone because it'll hurt the stone, not your foot. I just made that up, by the way. Terry.
A comment. I'm almost starting to think of artificial intelligence as applied experimental philosophy. Building the concept of self in a machine is simultaneously the most dangerous and the most powerful thing you can do. And one of the things that struck me about the comments about Buddhism is that is one approach, without saying what is the right approach. So I'm not trying to make any kind of religious statement at all about this, but that is one approach to dealing with the danger of self. Because if you think about it, who are some of the most dangerous figures in history have been ones who have been focused totally on self. The awareness of self simultaneously gives you the power to say, I wish to change that which is around me. Whereas if you're selfless, you can't really quite conceive of that. So it is a remarkable step. Like say, the instability starts internally. That a concept of self in a computer can literally cause the computer to destroy itself. But it also pervades in a much broader realm. And I think if you think of that way as, again, experimental philosophy, how do you keep the computer from destroying itself as it interacts with others? So there's I just hadn't thought of it in quite that way, and I thought that was intriguing, both in the importance of self and how we deal with self.
Is that possible?
Are you suggesting that computers can be suicidal?
Oh, absolutely.
It's a good question.
In fact, it's easier. Biological systems were extremely redundant. It takes literally thousands of neurons figuring out how to move your arm to move your arm. And each one of them has its own emotions. They do not do it the same way. So biological systems have this built-in redundancy where they don't easily do really stupid things. Computers don't have that problem. They can flip one bit and change their behavior totally. So it is actually extremely easy for a computer to commit suicide in a number of ways. So yes, and one of the reasons why we don't have general intelligences is just because of that. It's very hard to do. It's easy to make a puppet that doesn't do anything that you haven't told it to do.
But what about the emotions?
Well, they don't
They
have
emotions.
In emotions, and again, I when you talk about emotions, I think of qualia, and I think qualia are quite real, and we don't understand what they are. And I would categorically say that computers do not have qualia. They do not have sensations of red because there's no history or track or record of the impact of that. Whereas in humans, I think this qualia absolutely change our behavior. So we don't know what those are, but I would say computers, whatever they are, they're not emotional. We can fake it, we can pretend it, you can program it, but that's all it is.
Well, why would a computer commit suicide?
Because it would simply have a set of priorities that you programmed into it, and the interaction of those priorities say, it is now time to delete my program. And it would proceed to do so. And it's in a number of ways. And the problem is procedural, it's what you call rule-based programming. That's how we do our politics, by the way. Laws are rule-based programming. You see how oddly those can work out sometimes. Same thing with computers. You put up a bunch of rules, you say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. It all sounds good. And you put it all together, and then the computer does something completely insane that you did not foresee, because we just can't anticipate how all of those things interact. So we wind up with things that we just don't know what it's going to do. So yes, computers can commit suicide. They can destroy themselves. They can modify themselves. In most forms of programming, you avoid that for exactly that reason, because it's so easy for a computer to act in a bunch of imperatives that we gave it, but we didn't anticipate what it would do.
Okay, very nice.
It's a very good system to destroy computers. If the computers belong to an enemy, if you create the system whereby it has to commit suicide, you can actually explode a computer.
I had a little trouble understanding some of your words, but you can certainly come up with ways where the computer can. It's hard to make them literally go smoke, but even that is possible in some scenarios. So there's a lot of strange things that can happen.
My point was the computer won't want to commit suicide because it's got no emotions. You won't want to.
It only
say, I hate it here, I'm going to explode.
Yes, absolutely true. And this is why I say computers do not have emotions. We can, I know there are a few people who say that, but it's nonsensical, because the behavior is fully programmed in binary form, and there's no entry point. We've programmed that out of it. There's probably is some way you could get conscious into a computer. We made sure to keep that out. But the trouble is, you put goals into them. People put goals in. The goals are what drive them, not emotions. And the goals do mimic emotions.
My bank tells me that they care about me. That is, my bank has emotions. And so if my bank's got emotions, why
a proper bank
with emotions?
Are we going to be programmed out of having our emotions is the question.
How do you know we are not already programmed?
Exactly. It's happening, maybe.
Okay, so can I move on now, folks? Just a bit, just a tiny bit. What I want to get to is the stuff that's going on today, which is quite horrific, and it has a connection to everything that we've been saying. For reasons as diverse as they are complicated, the separation between us and them is vividly carried out in the streets of the United States, of France, of a lot of countries. People are battling each other for reasons that are so diverse that the weird thing is that ostensibly they're fighting for equality, and this is really weird because they're beating each other up, and everybody wants to be equal to what? The desperation to find similarities to me looks as though there's an increase in dissimulation. I mean, this is a dissonance that I've noticed, and this is amazing. And I'm going to talk about, we've got 3 Americans here, so please bear with me. I will speak about things that are happening in this. Hello?
That's me. I'll take it.
Sorry, Americans, but I have to mention a few things. All right, don't be angry. Not me. It's not me talking. There's going to be an increase in racism because of things like Black Lives Matter. It's not me talking. It's just an opinion. Okay. Why is, for example, and I know nothing about this, so please excuse me, Americans, I really know nothing about this, but why is it that White Lives Matter is racist, but Black Lives Matter is not? That I, as a foreigner, I know, I, as a foreigner, do not understand. These are words, these are language, and I know that language is lethal. But I, from the outside, don't understand why you can't say, for example, that all lives matter.
Well, I'll answer that question.
Well, hang on, haven't finished.
Sorry,
haven't finished.
You are hitting a nerve.
I haven't finished my thing yet.
These are not complicated questions. These are about power. These are about race. These are about a lot of things deeply embedded in our communities, and they're not complicated, frankly.
I'm pleased they're not complicated. For me, they're very complicated. Hang on. For me, from outside, very complicated. I don't understand why you can't say Black Lives Matter too, TOO. What is wrong with that? Why is that divisive?
It's not. People say that all the time.
I've never said it before. Never.
That's what the white power structure doesn't listen to. They don't hear. That is exactly what they're saying. They're saying Black Lives Matter too.
But they're not.
They're saying everybody's lives matter, but one group of people's lives have not been given the same value as others. Black Lives Matter.
Then say the words. Say the words. Black Lives Matter too.
And for 400 years, it's been White Lives Matter, and that's been it. That's
no, okay. I understand that. I understand.
So the same reason you can't say white power, but you can say black power, because the power structure is in place. These are forms of resistance.
I understand that. But we're talking about language, and if we want people to feel that we are us, so why not add that small word TOO? Why not?
Because it didn't work. That's what they tried in the 60s. It didn't work.
Maybe there's just different processes that people have to go through at this stage, which I agree with the other guy that's just spoken, is the whole history and heritage of what it means to be Black has never been realized. And that's now really being challenged. And being white, we've been blind to really understanding from a Black person's perspective how it is to be in their body, in their position in this world, because of the heritage of what they've experienced. And unless they do what they're doing now, which is raising our consciousness to appreciate their existence and what they have had to suffer. I'm interested, Ron, in why you've introduced it, and I'm wondering if you're being deliberately provocative to generate this conversation.
Yes.
Us and them. I'm trying to think. I don't doubt you realise this, and now I'm thinking you're being. I wonder if you're being deliberately provocative.
Those who know me know my middle name is provocative. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But
Ron, I missed part of this since I had to step out of room for a minute. But
you were lucky.
I have no problem whatsoever with the phrase Black Lives Matter as is, because it is a simple statement of fact that most people don't realize.
Yeah.
Because for most people, Black lives don't matter squat.
Yeah.
There are so many
There are
people,
no facts.
a lot of
here.
them, they could care less if you killed, slaughtered Black people. To them, they're not something you need to worry about. And I have seen that. I have seen that. I'm lucky I grew up in a town that didn't have any particular racism in it, but the only reason why was because it was all white. So unfortunately, I missed out on the racism because there was no target, but not because there wasn't a problem there in terms of some of the attitudes and that. So I'm actually extremely good with the statement because I think it's a simple matter of fact, statement of fact. Hey, excuse me, Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
That means you didn't know that. And to turn it around and try to make that into a racist statement is exactly the kind of nonsense, the kind of racist filth that gets propagated all the time here in the United States. That's exactly how it works every time. You turn it around and say, you know what, you're the racist. You say that we've been pushing you down. You say we've been giving you a hard time. Well, you're the evil person. That's the problem. That's what it is every time, every single time. And for once, we're not doing that. We have white people going out saying Black Lives Matter, and I love it. I think it's a great thing.
And that goes back.
And you can, oh, sorry, you can tell this is an emotional issue for me. So.
Yeah.
That goes back to the early part of the conversation about waves. The closer you get, you zero in, you miss everything else around you. And I think a large pop group of people in this country missed everything around them. They have no idea.
No, and that is absolutely the case. That is absolutely the case. It is so hard to talk to someone with a Black background to get them to actually open up to you even a tiny, tiny bit about what has actually gone in their lives. I remember sitting in a room in Texas, in my office in Texas, and a good friend walked in. She said, "Why are you sitting by the window like that?" I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Don't you worry about getting shot?" And I go, whoa, you know, a very different background. I'm just trying to comprehend where she was coming from. But she would explain a little bit of what that life was that she had grown up with. Her husband had trouble getting to sleep when he moved to the suburbs. You know why? Because he wasn't used to not having sirens and gunshots in the background. And he just wasn't used to it. And he had grown up with that, and to him that was actually soothing. But it was, I think many white people just have no clue, no concept of what has been done to people in our country. How many people in our schools have been taught the slaughter, the outright slaughter of men, women, and children that happened in Oklahoma 100 years ago? It was just a slaughter. It was just the police, the Army, the Air Force came in and they slaughtered them. Why? Because they were prosperous. No other reason. Absolutely no other reason except that they were prosperous. And you can't have that. So they want to go back to the stereotype. See, Black people always have to be in the stereotype. So if you have success, there it comes. So I'm sorry, this is.
No, we're with you.
Can I, there was a, I don't know whether we're sort of going off tangent.
Very much.
Here, right? So I'll be quick. But there may be some others, you know, probably UK people, but they had a really interesting series of two documentaries on the TV here about a month ago. It was with children, two groups of children, a white group, and then a sort of mixed ethnic group. And they had various facilitators and psychologists, and it was what it came down to was exactly what Terry was saying, that the white people couldn't understand why the ethnic minorities were behaving differently. And when they explained things like, well, you might get shot, you might get stopped by the police at any time, that's why we behave in this way. And what we want is you to accept that we behave in this way and we have good reason to behave in this way. And that's what it really sort of was the key point in it, I think. So just accept the behaviors, don't try and understand them, I think was the message.
And now
behaviors aren't threatening, they're just designed for self-defense for the most part.
And now back to philosophy, folks. Sorry about that. It was supposed to be about language, but it misfired.
Language has power. Language is important, and you know, and I think
language is everything. So the point I wanted to make was that there've been mistakes in history. Now we're coming to history, folks. We got a couple of historians here. The mistake has been, and this follows along that trying to make people equal, trying to make everybody us, so that mistakes were made with borders. You said about people not understanding other people. After the First World War, the borders of the Middle East were divided up very strangely. There was Iraq and there was Syria, and there were borders that have nothing to do with the ethnic groups. They were cut in half, and now these borders are sort of holy. These are all mistakes. The Kurds are spread all over the place across all the borders. And so these are mistakes of trying to make everybody us when we are us and them, and somehow that has to be solved. And of course, China and Tibet, and that was I know very little about it, but we do have here an eminent professor who's just come out with a book about Tibet. And so what happened, as far as I understand, and I only know one sentence about this, so correct me, that Tibet was brought into China as a nation, and that the Chinese would like the Tibetans to be sort of Chinese, where they're not and they can't be.
I mean, that's fundamentally the case. I'll just start by saying that the idea that we made mistakes in history when we create boundaries is absolutely true. The problem is that there's no correct answer. Every time you make a boundary, you make decisions. And of course, everybody within those boundaries is not going to be consulted in those decisions.
Yep.
You're always going to, and one of my arguments I make is essentially that when you move from the age of empire to the age of nation states, what you do is you fundamentally, empires do a lot of things. Among them is that they allow for difference. They're not transformative most of the time. They don't try to make everybody the same. In fact, they rule through difference. Whether it's the Ottomans and their millet system, or I can go on and on, that's how empires work. Nation states fundamentally are different. And one of the things that they do is they create majorities and minorities, a concept that didn't necessarily exist in the same sense in the era of empires. So in the case of China, essentially what you have is they trying to transform the Qing Empire, which is a massive multi-ethnic empire, into a nation state. In the process, you make majorities and you make minorities. So Tibetans become one of those minorities within that nation state. Now, there was no concept of Tibetans before this. Tibetans were much more localized. So even if Tibet had been its own nation state, Tibet would have made its own minorities and forced some of those people to conform to, or to adapt or to assimilate into some sort of norm. So I don't think there's a right. I think mistakes are made in history. I'm just not sure that there is a correct way to do it where you don't have these processes.
Yes, it's the thing about zooming in. The more you zoom in, the more you feel that you can't do it. So there's no way you can zoom in for it to be perfect. It has to be approximate, basically, in the terms that I was talking about, right? Because you said that even in Tibet they're divided up. So you're zooming in, and you're finding that, yes.
Well, unless your communities are very, very small.
Yeah. But
villages.
It'll never be small enough. Never.
Right. No, it won't be. It wouldn't be efficient. Wouldn't be effective. But the process, that's so. In the case of China, they have to figure out how to deal with this multi-ethnic empire and to make it into a state. And the first thing they said was, we're going to have Minzu Tuanjie. We're going to have ethnic equality. Everybody in this country is going to be different but equal. Tibetans will be one group, the Chinese will be one group, the Mongols, the whatever, and they'll all be equal. The problem is, and they couldn't convince people like Tibetans and Mongols and Muslims why they should be part of China. You know, what's their stake in a China that is dominated by the Chinese? And now more recently, they're trying to change that to an idea of minzu ronghe, which means something like ethnic melding, a melting pot concept, like they think America has, in which there would be more of assimilation. And I guess the answer is there's no correct answer to this, right? In every case, nation building is essentially a process of violence, right? Nations inflict violence on people, physical violence or epistemological violence. That's just what they do. And again, that's the situation we're in. I don't have a solution to it. I don't think there's a correct way to deal with this other than to point out the processes that we're left with. So I don't know if that made sense or not. But.
No, fine, great. Thank you. Frank.
Yeah, I disagree with the concept that these are mistakes. I think saying they are mistakes is revisionism, because in the eyes of the policymakers, say, of the 19th century, the colonialists who, for instance, divided up Africa without taking into consideration the ethnic dissimilarities of the various African tribes, they did exactly the same. They just cut up Africa, because the British had the idea of going from the Cape Colony to Egypt in one go, and the French had the other idea of going from west to east, and to divide up Africa according to their colonies which they had established. It wasn't a question of mistakes for the people who made it. It was power politics. The whole idea then was imperialism, was colonialism. The whole and actually the idea of nationalism hadn't actually come into it yet. Nationalism was really rife in Europe, but not in Africa and not so much in Asia. And therefore they exploited the situation. They didn't see it as a mistake. They saw it as that was power politics. That's what you do. If you want to expand your sources to find markets to increase your economic possibilities, especially when Europe had just come out through the Industrial Revolution, they looked for markets, they looked for sources, and they did everything possible. They didn't consider any of this as a mistake.
But Frank, nobody thinks they're making mistakes when they're making mistakes. We only see them afterwards. Of course, they didn't think it was.
That's what I say. That's when you look back.
Of course, they didn't think it was a mistake. It was the right thing to do. Except that now we see that it was a mistake, and which is very easy to see afterwards. But while you're doing something,
that's being ahistorical. If you look at it now, you're not in the shoes of the people at the time, and therefore you're not in the mental concept of the people at the time, and therefore the idea of mistakes doesn't come into it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's obviously true, but I don't think that's the point really. The point is that we are talking about revisionism. We look at history, we're left in these conditions that we're in because of choices people made in the past, which maybe mistakes is the wrong word, but have brought us to this situation that we're in, which is unresolvable and filled with violence committed by states against people within them and outside their borders as well.
Absolutely, but we're talking about the whole program. I was talking about the human condition. Are you going to take this out of the human condition? The search for power, the search for superiority, the search for domination. You cannot get rid of it. It's part of the human condition.
Ron, my understanding for decades has been that in the case of Iraq, this was not a mistake. It was a conscious, very explicit strategy to divide several ethnic groups in half in order to prevent them from coming to power. That this was a conscious decision by the British government to say, this is how we want to do this because we feel this will make these groups less threatening. Now, others may have heard other things, but that's been my understanding for decades, that the odd design of Iraq was not a matter of indifference at all. It was consciously, explicitly done to create division.
They
succeeded marvelously in that sense.
They succeeded in that.
Yes, they did.
The problem wasn't between the powers and the indigenous populations. The problem was between the powers who were dividing up the areas. Like in the Middle East, the problem was between Britain and France, how to divide up the Middle East. The same went for Africa as well, and including Germany also came into this. And so therefore, the problem was between the various European powers, not so much the indigenous populations. They were cast aside. They were considered irrelevant to the whole situation.
So we are in us and them. Maurice, are you for us or you're for them?
Oh, I'm definitely for the other. But
Okay.
I want to just go back to your opening remarks on this particular part of the discussion when you said that what we are all interested in is equality. Everybody wants to be equal. I can't see how that's possibly true, because although maybe lots of people would like to be equal, everybody wants to be more equal than the others. And when you mentioned being equal, my thoughts went straight away to the fact that the Jewish people in Europe, not only in Europe, the last 2,000 years suffered from persecution. And eventually, I'm not going through the whole historical thing, they ended up with a state of Israel, which was intended perhaps to put that right, and we can be equal with the rest of the world. We don't have to be subject to whatever persecution. And then we forget what it was like to be persecuted, and we behave badly towards others. There doesn't seem to be an awful lot of the need for equality amongst people.
But Maurice, you said yourself that the point of making a nation, Israel, was to be equal to other nations. It is a process of being equal, all the time trying to be equal to other people, unsuccessfully. Unsuccessfully, I agree. But surely the idea is, let's all be us. Let there not be them. Let's all be us. And it can't work. It never has worked. It can't, because there is them and there is us. And the bottom of the us is the I, the me, the I. And that's where that split between the I and the me. And I don't want to go into that, but you know, the feeling that we want to be equal is spread all over the place. I can't see any way how that could not be a thesis of how people want to be, even if it doesn't work. That's for sure.
Communism. That's communism.
Well,
that's utopia. That's communism.
But I think
Debbie?
maybe we should make a distinction between, I don't know, some sort of metaphysical human equality, that we're all equal, or in our being, and equal rights. I mean, when it's political movements, there's no fight, or it's not about some sort of equal metaphysical essential equality. It's about rights, it's about human rights, it's about the same rights. That's what people politically or effectively are fighting for or speaking for, that is human rights, that humans as humans deserve the same rights when it comes to schools, when it comes to education, when it comes to housing, when it comes to a political system. There's nobody that is not equal in the sense of a right. And then it's, I think, much easier and plausible to see when we say we're all equal. Yeah, we all have the same rights, the same political rights, the same right to anything that the system, that the state can give us. So I think that's when, I mean, to talk about some sort of essential metaphysical right or equality is difficult, because it's very difficult to think about what does it mean that we are equal. What does that mean? We are different. It's very difficult to see, because we have others, the other, and we look different, and we are different. Does that necessarily entail different or unequal rights? So in that, when we're all equal, when we are the us, yeah, politically, rightfully, we should have the same rights. So
I'm not. That's a very, very complicated and long deep subject about rights, because yeah, we are all equal, we are all different, and we're all born different, and people have more intelligence and less intelligence, and etc., etc. Talking about rights, I think, is a legal thing. Now, when you're talking about metaphysical rights, that's definitely problematic to say that everybody has the same right. Where does that come from? Is that a universal law?
It is
philosophers.
That's what I mean. It's impossible to talk about that. It doesn't get us anywhere. It's like saying we all have different consciousness, and then we're stuck in our this metaphysical discussion and domain about what does it mean to be metaphysically, if there's such a term, metaphysically equal. The equality has to be referred to something else. It can't. I think it cannot be referred to something that is very metaphysical or spiritual or cosmological. It's something to do with rights. I mean, if there's no equality in a society, it's because there are no equal rights, or people are treated differently, unequally. It's the practicality of the term. It has to be referred to some sort of practical, pragmatic, ethical, morality way of judging the equality.
Speaking of the pragmatic side of that you just mentioned, the U.S. Way of expressing that often is not so much in rights, but in terms of opportunity, but it means the same thing.
Yes.
Saying the right is that you have the opportunity. The pragmatic side of it is this: if you have equal opportunity in a large society with diverse ethnic backgrounds and diverse things, it is an amazingly effective way of calming down tensions, even if people are completely unequal in what they get. So you get the Bill Gates who comes up and gets all the money. You get the more recent examples with the Google guys. If people feel that the opportunity is there, that they're equal in the sense that if they have some special thing that is unique to them, that they have a chance to exploit that, and it could be very diverse in what it might be. I mean, every person is absolutely unique in some sense. But if they feel they have the opportunity to do that, it has an astonishing calming effect on even very diverse societies. So there is a pragmatic meaning in terms of the philosophical side.
Yeah, that's my main point, that equal needs to be, in my opinion, discussed within an ethical domain, not in the metaphysical domain. It can be, but I find it perhaps less interesting, or
Yes.
You can't get out of it. It has to be in, when I say practical, for me, it's always ethical. It's always morality, because that is when we talk about the other. Once you talk about the other, you put yourself straight in morality, straight in the ethical domain. Otherwise, I find it unconstructive. You can't arise from that.
I think we're very much in agreement on that point.
It can't work.
Morris.
It can't work.
In that case, I want to introduce a point of disagreement and say that we're all talking as spoiled Westerners. This is the case.
Guilty as charged.
Okay, and were we, or were some of us, to be part of, let's say, a tribe, let's say a chamula, a family, a traditional grouping in which the individual matters nothing whatsoever, and only the group, the set, matters. An individual's life counts for nothing, whereas the prosperity of the group, of the set, is all.
That's an excellent point, Bruce.
And that's, I don't know, that's probably half the world. So how can we talk about self and other without taking into account?
Because I'm American. I absolutely fall guilty of that one. That is such an American thing to say, the individual, absolutely.
Yes.
Guilty
That's
as charged.
capitalism. Yeah.
It can never work in a liberal democratic society.
Guilty
You
as
can
charged.
never get equality in a liberal democratic society
And it
because
produces a
it leads
bias
to
in my perspective.
capitalism, and it leads to it. You can. Did you hear me? No. I said it can never work in a liberal democratic society because in a liberal democratic society you're going to create capitalism, and capitalism creates the huge gaps between the wealthy and the less wealthy. And it creates these huge corporations, and the corporations pick their people and pay them different salaries. And therefore, you have the fluctuations in salaries and fluctuations in means, and you already have inequality. You cannot have equality. You can ask for equal rights, but you cannot get the equality that you're looking for. And you'll always have the gap, and you'll always have the frustration of enormous amounts of groups who are dissatisfied with the situation. And that's what happens in all the capitalistic societies of the Western day. It's one of the flaws of democracy. It's one of the flaws. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. That's liberal democracy for you.
You can minimize the gap.
I think the problem is that we're looking for solutions. As Benno said, that I think we need to accept that there are no solutions. I think that's what you said, Benno. There are no solutions, and we need to find the best way, even if we know that this is not a perfect solution. Is that not what you vaguely said, Benno?
Vaguely.
Okay.
No, it is what I said. Although I mean, I'm not sure. Again, I was talking specifically in the case of majority-minority rights, particularly in China, which is a unique, I mean, not unique, but an authoritarian system. But I was suggesting more widely that these issues are widespread across the earth, in any nation state, and I don't think it's particularly Western. I do object to this idea that this is in the Western capitalist system we have this, and the rest of the world's different. No, that's not. I mean, tribal societies have individuals too. They are not equal. I think if you look across, China supposedly is a socialist system. It's incredibly unequal. So I would push back a little bit on the sort of particular criticism of the liberal West as the only source of this capitalist inequality. But going back to your saying, yeah, I think that there are no solutions, and I guess that's where I left it. I didn't even go so far to say that we can sort of push towards a better.
I think
condition.
it gets back to my approximation thing, that things work if they work because they work approximately enough for it to work, like the map that we need, that Frank brought up, is the map that is big enough for us to get where we want. We do not need every tiny thing, and sometimes we need a map where we just see one town and another town. That's enough for us. And somehow, if we get to an approximation that works, that is what we should aim for. Well, of course, you can't aim for approximation. What you aim for is not approximation, but what you end up with is approximation. It's what happens in language, and we talked about language in the Second World War in Italy. Mussolini wanted people to be equal and not have this the high U and the low U, lei, etc. He wanted to have one word, voi, right? You, so everybody's equal. It didn't work. People didn't accept it. Hitler wanted to take out all foreign words from a language, all of them. I mean, you can't do that. Every language is full of foreign words. These things don't work. Everybody's trying to solutions that don't work. And talking about communism, Frank, the communism and fascism is so close, it's quite ridiculous. Because if you got fascism is all about the other, right? you get rid of the other, and you've got us, right? That's absolutely wonderful. Only when you get rid of them are we left with us. But of course, that has never worked. Now, communism was ostensibly about all of us being us. So you get rid of borders. You don't need nations because we're all us. But the workers are us. The bourgeoisie is not us. We get rid of them, and we've again got rid of the other. And anyway, communism worked wonderfully for the people on the top, who were then them and us. Now, none of this works. Benno, you objected to what I said. You made rude comments.
I object to the conflation of fascism and communism.
I thought you would.
And also want to point out, I know you know this, that Soviet-style communism of the 20th century is not socialism. That's one form.
You never mentioned the word socialism, by the way, on purpose.
Marxism. One form of Marxism that out of many different possibilities.
Communism can only work if it's voluntary. It has to come from the people who are practicing the communism. It can only come from people who are practicing the communism, such as in the kibbutz. At a certain stage in the development of the kibbutz, there was communism because it was based on a voluntary basis. And that was probably one of the only cases where communism worked. The moment you force people to be equal, it won't work. And that's what happened, obviously, in the USSR, right? So it turns into utopia. But I think George Orwell had it right when we're talking about us and the other. He realized that the sort of system in 1984 was not to have the us and the other, but only have us. And therefore, they were brainwashed. The people were brainwashed and weren't allowed to think, weren't allowed to have the other. They only had one conscience, one being, one thought mentality. I mean, that was the idea behind George Orwell. I think he understood it then. What do you say about that, Ron?
I obviously agree with everything you say, as usual. What I basically want to say that this business of us and them is such a huge thing, and I can't see how any philosophy can be spoken about if we don't discuss what we are, as opposed, and I say that as opposed to somebody else. Let's move back. Let's move back very, very slightly. The first person who mentioned the other as such was Hegel, and it was, but it came much, much earlier. The first time the other came in was Adam and Eve. But by the way, so that's the way I see it. So Adam was very happy. There was no other, and then of course, God. I'm coming to that. There was.
Would you say he fancied a bit of the other?
only when he saw it. The philosophical problem would be, would you fancy a bit of the other if you didn't know what it was? So everything was great, and then Eve came along, of course, and
actually,
there was
somebody before Eve. There was somebody before Eve.
Are you being?
There was Lilith.
Are you being?
Lilith.
Wait a minute. Are you being?
No, there was Lilith.
Are you being heretical again?
Yes, Lilith.
Okay. Forget the Bible. No Lilith in the Bible.
Well,
Adam and
I
Eve.
don't know.
Adam and Eve. Just bear with me for a sec, okay?
All right,
Adam and Eve.
Get on with it.
Adam and Eve. And there was the other suddenly, and of course she mucked everything up. And when God came and said, "Look here, there's the other," and Adam recognized the other because he suddenly realized they were naked, and that's where the other came about. And from then on, we've been going downhill all the way. I mean, look at Cain and Abel, and look at the Bible. Everybody's fighting everybody else. So where are we going? Look at Descartes, for example. if you have to. He was possibly the first sort of Western philosopher, the first scientist, and he said the only thing exists is my mind, right? I can't prove there's anything else because there's only the I, and he was completely stuck. He couldn't move from there. He got rid of everything. Let me get rid of everything, and what am I left with? I'm left with I. And they said, and of course the problem was, where do you go from there? Well, Descartes had a cop out. He said, well, there's God. God is there. That's the other one, and that's how it moved. That's how it moved from there. So we are now in the corona, folks, and how does that leave us? The corona has exacerbated the division between us and them, but has it? After all, in Zoom, here we are. Are we further or are we closer? The whole business of close and near has changed, because I don't know anymore where you are, and if you're far from me means nothing, because you're all on my screen. Okay, so where does that? How does that work? I feel closer to some people I meet on the internet than I do to some of my family. Now, how does that work? Where's the division now between us and them? And something very, very interesting about Zoom, by the way, Shakespeare, of course, said all the world's a stage, right? On the stage, you look out and you see the people in front of you, but on Zoom we see ourselves, and that's amazing. It's never usually, always, when we talk, we don't see ourselves, we see the others. We imagine what the others think of us, but we're talking.
Shakespeare said something about the coronavirus.
Hello? What?
Shakespeare said something about the coronavirus.
Go on then.
He said all the people wear masks.
Okay. Okay. I'll give it. Yes, and
Well,
you just interrupted my train of thought, by the way. What?
Oh, sorry about that. Well, I mean, you talked about.
Well, don't do it again, okay?
Okay. You were saying all the world's a stage. Carry on.
Yeah, well, I went further on that one. The point is that...
And all the men and women are merely players and actors.
Thank you. We're looking out at ourselves, talking to other people is very, very weird, because we are now seeing ourselves, being ourselves, the way we think other people are seeing us, the way we sort of know other people see us, but in fact, we don't know how they see us, because we are seeing ourselves the way we think we are. But we have no idea how others see us, even though we can see ourselves seeing you. Corona has brought out Zoom, which is amazing, and the thought of actually seeing ourselves. I'm now looking at myself talking, which I've never done before, and I'm not sure that I like it. But I actually I've never seen that, and all of you are now looking at yourselves, as well. So I think that's sort of amazing. Yes, Morris.
I want to just point out something else about Corona and us and them. And that is that as far as I can see where I live, we are very much divided into us and them. Us being those who want to try to prevent ourselves from getting Corona by whatever means we can manage, and them who are going bankrupt, who are unemployed, who are having a terrible time finding enough to live on, and they see the thing quite differently. And this is creating a strain within the society. There's us and definitely them. I understand how they feel. Maybe they understand how I feel. But it's clear that we are facing a difficult problem from two different sides completely of the issue.
In some ways, it's an example of the trolley problem. You know, you've got you all know it, I suppose. You've got the trolley or the train, whatever it is, hurtling down the path, and ahead of it is one person, and on the other, well, it's going towards 5 people, and over there is one person. The choice is, do you kill one person to save 5? The problem that you talked about is which ones are we going to save? It's our health, it's society. It is one of these problems that I don't think is solvable. What is your solution to this? Do you let people go bankrupt so that we can live, or do we live and let other people go bankrupt? This is a huge problem.
Where does equality come into this? Equality has no place in this whatsoever. And this is a divisive situation. It could arise not just through Corona, all sorts of other things can bring this about, but this is the one that's come to us. And equality has nothing to do with it. Morality gets us nowhere. And I don't see the solution at all.
Also, I'd point out the binary choices are almost always artificial and generally reflect kind of a laziness on what you can do. Because absolutely in our country, I think you can tell by the death numbers, we could do better. We could have done a lot better. We could continue to do a lot better. So it's very seldom really the simple binary choices. So I think most of these tend to be, a bit flimsy in terms of that. And really the trick many times is, what is the creative solution where you go together and say, what's something that works? Or something that works better?
Terry, sorry, Debbie.
Yeah, I actually see the Corona time as actually reflecting these inequalities and showing what system or what government system is best. I mean, now with the Corona, countries that have more social systems and are more they have more aid and are more social than capitalist are doing much better than other countries. I think even Trump has to give some the Medicare, or has to give some sort of aid. I think that actually did show and expose where that countries that do have a stable social basis does much better than countries who don't.
Not so sure that Sweden is doing so well.
Well, I'm not talking about Corona, but they're not going bankrupt. And I know that also in Holland, people are not getting bankrupt that easily as in other countries. And in countries where there's poorer people, and they get affected more than richer or privileged people. So and societies. So I actually think, Maurice, that actually showed and exposed the systems that are more social and more economically for a equal system than others. I know in Holland it's not as bad as in other countries where there's no such a social background and stability. So it's not that extreme. I think it's not either or, as you express here.
Terry, can I just get to the point you made? Sometimes there are binary decisions that have to be made. In Italy, there were decisions that had to be made like that every day. They did not have enough machines. They had to make horrible decisions about basically who's going to live and who's going to die.
Why talk about Italy? That's what's happening to us right now, and it's getting worse.
Precisely.
The past tense, they've gotten past it. We're getting into it.
Precisely. So there are sometimes binary decisions, to live or to die. That is a terrible, terrible binary decision you have to make.
Yes, but there are also multiple levels of decisions that go into the situations you go. So you have a range of authorities that are involved with that. Now, in our particular scenario, we happen to come up with one of the worst case scenarios where the people who are trying the hardest to help are being given the hardest decisions, which is a terrible state of affairs, and certainly would not have been a high probability future in most of our previous outcomes. But instabilities propagate instability. So you can have very strange things happen to a dynamic system when there's a major perturbation. And that's exactly what we're going right now. It makes the future extremely unpredictable. So we'll have to see where this comes out. But we could have done better.
Can I take you back to us and them? Because, Debbie, what you pointed out is that in socialist systems, you say, socialist or countries with more of a socialist system, they seem to manage much better. But that surely is a system, the socialist system is one in which there are more of us than there are of them. That is, it's so inclusive that there isn't really a them at all. That the criteria for being accepted as us are very, very easy to pass through, and everybody is included.
Yeah, then
sorry.
Yeah.
Carry on.
No, then I would again try to address the question again practically and ethically and economically. What do we mean by the us and the them? I live in Holland, and it's quite diverse, and there are lots of us's and thems. But when it comes to the system treats everybody as, if you say, I don't know, as the us or the them. And the fact that they are the them, they're still within the economical system, in the health system, education system. I mean, a society that is more stable educationally, economically, they are not as sick, and the country can help them much more than other countries. But I think it's interesting what you're saying about the us and the them, because within the system, everybody maybe, as you say, is us. But then what do you mean in that way? What do you mean by us and the them? If we're in the same system, or we have the same rights, or we are entitled to the same education, to the same health system, then in what way do you mean there is that distinction? Is it a metaphysical distinction? I mean, if you know, there are lots of ethnic groups here, a lot of diversity. It's of course a very, very liberal country, but the country, yeah, it does treat everybody as the us in, I would say, in the national sense of the word, and that what makes it more equal and more stable and more able to deal and to deal with situations like Corona. The health system here is much better than many other countries. So so people are, well, the death rate here is quite high, but I think that doesn't.
Apart from that,
but that is very interesting because this is something that doesn't really have anything to do with the health system. It's something to do with their culture. Holland is one of the only countries that have euthanasia.
The actual reason,
Claire,
okay.
yes.
For instance.
Claire.
The actual reason for everybody catches coronavirus of whatever ethnicity or political persuasion, but the people who get acute illness and who die from it, it's because of their diet. And the diet that people have in Holland is different from the diet in England and in the USA. It's the people who eat chemicals who die of coronavirus.
Because they have access to healthy food. Yeah.
The chemicals I'm referring to are artificial sweeteners, and if you consume those very heavily on a daily basis, those are the people who are vulnerable to the coronavirus. Anyway,
that's my point. Everything at the end, I think everything at the end of the day has to do with the social and government system. I mean, also access to healthy food. Healthy food is very expensive, and cooking.
That's not true.
Yes, I mean, organic food is very expensive, even here.
I'm on a very low income. I just earn money from 4 Nigerian lodgers. I live with black people, and I'm on a very low income, and I eat proper food. I've had coronavirus, but I'm not dead. You know, I've recovered.
Oh, I'm happy.
And I put it down to my diet, because actually you eat real food and you don't get so ill.
Glad to hear that.
That is also true, but that's also a lot to do with awareness to that. And
for example, Africans eat real food and they drink water, but the people whereas black people who are English, they often eat like the food that has all the chemicals in, and they get ill, so they get twice the mortality of the other people.
Because they don't have probably time to cook and process food and all that. It's really, but it is, they have more kids, they work more hours, and to eat healthily, you need to cook.
Africans also have lots of kids and work a lot of hours.
No, and if you see with research, everywhere in the world, most minorities were hit worst with corona, because they are in very dense areas, have more pollution there, and more kids, and they don't eat very healthily. And
I'm actually living in Derby in the multicultural area, and I'm right in the middle of it, and I live with Africans. So, but you do have a choice. You know, you do have a choice, and I'm saying lots of minorities eat proper food, but the ones that don't are the ones who have had the high mortality.
I think that any speculation about what corona is about going to lead us down the garden path, a very healthy garden path, but I think that a lot of speculation about corona, I don't think that's where we really want to go at the moment, because nobody really knows what's going on. That's my feeling.
But it is true, you need to eat healthy, have good friends, have love and money, that we all agree with, and just be happy. That we know it's all.
Wearing masks really helps.
That's right. Ron, if as Debbie points out, socialist countries seem to do better in this, then I must ask you the question that is obvious, and this them, us and them, who cares? What does it matter? That was what you said, somebody always says towards the end of the conversation. So I'm asking you, well, what does it matter if there's us and them, or we're all the same, or not?
You're asking me?
No, I'm asking Ron.
Well, all I can say is, why does anything matter? We may as well not bother to discuss anything.
I'm fine with that too.
No, you're not actually, because you come along here in order to discuss things. Like you wouldn't come every time. The people who come here are interested to talk about things, and we don't solve anything, but we're sitting together in a very nice way and discussing things that we must probably think about if we have time and think about things. And here we have a chance to actually talk about it. Whether it matters what we say here to the world, no. Whether it matters that I write things and hope people read them and think that is interesting, yeah, I think that is important to me. And if it makes a difference, then I'm very, very happy. And if it doesn't, I accept the fact that it might not. But that's why I'm here. I mean, here, not here particularly here. That's why I'm here. That's what I do. And if people can come along and talk to me or write with me, etc., that's fine. I learn from everybody. I always learn from what we do here. Somebody says something that's very interesting, and it sparks something in me. It could be one sentence, and I always learn. And I think that everybody, when they go and talk to people, normal people, learn something. I, for example, don't think that we're all looking for stability. Somebody just mentioned stability. There is no stability. That's absolute rubbish. There is no stability. There can't be. The thing moving all the time. How can there be stability? If you have freedom, then you're taking away somebody else's freedom. There is no balance of freedom, is there? If you're telling people wear a mask, and somebody says, I'm not going to wear a mask, it's my right, I am free, I'm not going to wear a mask, and then somebody says, but if you don't wear a mask, you're affecting other people. Says, I don't care. I am free. I don't want to wear a mask. So where is the stability? There is none. Somehow we're all trying to make everybody us, and we're not, because there are lunatics.
What we can do is assess the outcomes of our philosophies. In the case of the United States, we have chosen a strategy of maximizing us versus them to the nth degree. It is causing the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. If that is not a lesson in terms of the impact of philosophical choices, I don't know what is.
You're right.
Because we aren't done yet. If we reach 500,000 by December, we're still not done yet. So there are horrible consequences to bad choices. And to me, one of the worst choices you can make is to maximize us versus them, because it does nothing but damage every possible system. It undermines social intelligence, which is a whole topic I could get into. The whole idea is, how do you maximize the intelligence of your society? A lot of times capitalism is a hidden discussion of issues like that. And one of the great ways to maximize stupidity of a society and maximize death, maximize bad consequences, is to destroy the ability to share, to interact, to share solutions. And that is exactly the experiment we're undergoing right now. And we are seeing the numbers rather vividly.
You're right.
It's not over yet. We've already got another 100,000 baked into the system, and we'll see how many more hundreds of thousands we wind up with dead. And I don't like it. I'm not happy about it. And I'm stuck with it. And I'm just waiting for the next wave to hit where I'm at, or to hit people that I know. It's horrible, and it's sad, and it's unnecessary.
You're absolutely right. On a lighter mood.
Sorry. That wasn't exactly the light philosophy you took.
That was not a way to end this.
Can I briefly go to a totally different.
What's the good news? What's the good news?
I'm going to tell you a story. Isaiah Berlin tells a story of an intelligence officer in the Second World War. Right? The man who he interrogated said that if the officer promised him his life, then he would tell him all. What was the bloke supposed to do? Lie and save hundreds of people, which is the utilitarian method? Or, as Dostoevsky would have put it, no, truth above all. That's a nice story. Or a less nice story. There's a kidney machine, one kidney machine, and you got a choice. Sorry, Terry, you got a choice.
I thought you were giving a more cheerful tone here.
you got a kidney machine, and you've got a famous scientist, right? And you've got a child. Who do you give that kidney machine to? These are problems that people face, and and we can sit here and we can talk about it, but these are real problems.
Absolutely.
And the solution is have more than one machine.
That's also true. You're absolutely right.
Or realize that could I put a random question in? You have mentioned a book by the person who's not there right now,
Benno Weiner. Yes.
Yes, Benno. Okay, it says Dan here, Benno.
No, but that's the one who is with him. It happens to be his son.
I was hoping you would give a plug for the book, and also I've got to ask. I love those gold records in the background. I have no idea what they are, but that's impressive. So
okay. Dan, a plug for the book and the gold records.
Okay. The book is The Chinese Revolution in the Tibetan Frontier.
Okay.
And it's on Columbia Press.
You just got another sale.
You see,
I think it's a fascinating topic, and it's terrible what happens to Tibet. But yeah. So what are the gold records?
Past artists that I've worked with over time.
They're beautiful.
I'm the non-scholar on this call.
No, not at all. Not at all. And Dan is very, very modest. He what's the word? Promotes? I forget the word. Some of the biggest bands in the world. He's just being modest. Take no notice of him.
Oh, those are actual gold records from bands?
Yeah.
Oh wow! I'm even more impressed. I just thought it was beautiful. I didn't realize. I congratulate you, sir. That's very.
Terry, only the best people come to the first.
Why am I here?
The first Sunday of the month is where the best people gather. And we might not be many today, but they're the best. So I got one question for Terry. Very, very interests me that you spoke about robots and AI. Is there an us and a them for a robot? Is there such a thing? Are all robots the same? I mean, robots. Are there? Terry, you've gone quiet. Everybody's stopped. Everybody's frozen. Hello, can anybody hear me? We're all back again.
There's this old joke about there are only two people in this world who are really sane and intelligent. That's you and me. And I'm not so sure about you.
That's absolutely right. Terry, did you hear my question, by the way?
No, I may not have. I think you blanked out for a second there.
No, I think I disappeared. Actually, I still existed. So no, my question was with AI, is there an us and a them? I mean, you said robots have no emotion, right?
Right.
So
there are a few who would disagree with that, but I'm adamant about that. There's no room for it. It's not that they couldn't have it. Is there an us versus them? Everything in a robot, everything in artificial intelligence is a simulation of what we do. So we can simulate emotions. You can simulate concept of self. But when you simulate concept of self, it is more than just a simulation. It changes how it behaves. So yes, you can absolutely program in a concept of self, of us versus them, of competition. With some of the most dynamic communities of exploration are actually wars between computer entities.
Can I stop you for 1 second? Something very important. Camille, could you please show your face big for security? I can't have black squares. We had an incident a few months ago. Camille, can you hear me? Camille?
Camilla.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Camille.
Yes.
Oh, there she is.
No.
I don't know why
Ah.
it's not coming up, but
I recognize your voice. It's fine. It's fine. Sorry,
okay.
we had an incident, quite a
okay,
horrible
so
one.
it's
Sorry.
on my side. Okay.
No, okay. Sorry, Terry. Carry on.
One of it, actually, to me, one of the most frightening aspects of artificial intelligence is that they are being developed in many cases by competitive processes in which self is fundamental to the whole thing. They war with each other. The trouble is you get what you pay for. So if you create intelligence by creating a militaristic intelligence, that's what you get. So caution is needed on this. It really is. We're in an environment right now in which some of the most powerful bots in the world are some of the ones coming out of Russia. And they are adversarial to the extreme. So most of them are very dumb also, but it's not a good scenario. So I think there's good reason for concerns about how self-centered robots artificial intelligence can be, because they can be extraordinarily self-centered, just in terms of pragmatic.
Do human creators want robots to be like humans? Is that an aim?
Well, it's called generalized artificial intelligence, and yes, it is absolutely an aim, and it's also unachievable by any current technology. They also want to have intelligences that are not like us. Computers are extraordinarily good at some things and extraordinarily bad at other things. So the future prospect for that is actually to be some kind of amalgam that has some of the creativity of humans mixed with the incredible data capacity of robots. Read the Wall Street Journal. You're reading articles written by a computer. Those computers are able to digest the data in a fashion that a human cannot, and that they can write pretty good English. So at least for that kind of an article. So it's already here. A lot of articles are being computer written already. So where this will go is
now you told them my secret.
I thought you looked a little bit like a simulation. I wasn't going to say it, Ron.
Thank you.
You're a very good one.
Don't tell anybody.
One random comment on a totally different topic. You mentioned Descartes and about is I pronouncing his name right? Descartes,
yeah.
He thought it all boiled down to self. If he had looked even a little closer, I would argue, he could have found there was still other within himself, because the division of the brain into left and right is a well-proven aspect, and we can, in fact, argue with ourselves. Most of us have done it. One of us says, oh, that didn't feel right, and the other part says, oh, I think I'll do this. The logical part says, this person says they're not angry at me, so I'll accept what they say, and the other party says, my gosh, that person is furious at me. That is an argument between two parts of your own brain, literally. They're actually having a little debate over the corpus callosum. So I would say that the first instance of other is here. In fact, it's one of the things that sets us apart.
Definitely.
Almost any other mammal does not have that. And I find that fascinating. I think that's insightful about what we are. The fact that we have a division in ourselves somehow helps us to be more creative, a little more interesting.
More crazy.
A little crazier, absolutely. Crazy is part of it. So,
no, there's no. I think there's no doubt that there. But we didn't want to talk about that today. But it'll take hours. But the self is definitely not one thing, and it's moving and it's changing all the time, and it's never the same. And that's all part of it. And that, as you correctly say, to get a robot to do that seems at the moment impossible.
Yes. And by the way, even the founding book, Society of Mind by Minsky.
We have different selves in different situations. I said we have different selves in different situations, right? We act differently in different situations. We have different masks, as Shakespeare said.
Definitely. We've all got the Zoom mask on. Now we've got the intelligent mask.
Right.
On the first Sunday of.
Therefore, there's more than two of us. There are many of us.
You're the one who about 2 hours ago talked about us being psycho something. And now
Schizophrenic.
that's the word. And now you're backing it up and arguing with yourself, which proves that you were right.
Okay, so that means I can be schizophrenic in many different situations. That means I multiply the 2 by the number of situations I'm in.
Absolutely correct. Now you've got to create a robot, Terry, that will do that.
Well, in fact, one of the ways of creating a robot is you have to create an argument. Every thought has to be an argument. Every movement has to be an argument. And this is the lesson we have learned from biologically inspired artificial intelligence. Again, moving your arm. That is 1,000 neurons all saying, I want to do it this way, I want to do it this way, I want to do it this way. And they all get together and they finally come to a consensus and say, but this is the best way to do it.
Can
It's
the
so
robot
deeply
cry?
part of our biology. I'm sorry, what?
Can the robot cry?
I think at the point, yeah, well, you can certainly make it, the imitations of robots that they can do of human emotion are frighteningly good. And yes, you can make a robot look so sad that your heart will go out to it and you'll think, oh my gosh. And yet there is nothing behind it. It is no more real than just an image on a screen. From
I have a couple of friends like that. Anyway, I think that we'll all go on our various ways now, and I'll take our various selves and look at the other in a different way or the same way, whatever. Thank you very, very much for coming and joining me again. And I look forward to seeing you next time. And thanks very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Great to see you.
Bye.
Bye.